the second pillar of wisdom has arrived. So it's my great honour to introduce Jane Cummings.
The key thing, and I know that the other colleagues on the panel have just spoken as well, so that will be fine. I met Julia and Nikki a while ago, and they told me the story, and they told me what they wanted to do. And it just felt to me to be something that was simple, really meaningful, and pretty easy to implement, taking into account some of the difficulties that some staff might have, and some aspects of, do we really want carers to be there all the time, and is it the right thing to do? But it actually, I was completely committed, and ever since then been completely passionate about this. So I've completely swapped over what I was doing today, because actually I do think it's really important, and I would love, and it's really great that there's so many here. It'd be even better if we had lots more. I'm glad to see that it's being filmed, and I really hope that when you go out you spread the word, and that you each talk to 10, 20 people and actually try and get it implemented. I'm not going to spend a long time talking about dementia necessarily, because I think you've got more experts than me here to talk about that. But what I did want to do was talk about Jons' campaign in the context of leading change, adding value, and the 6 C's. So before I start doing that, can you just put a show of hands up, those of you that have heard of leading change, adding value? Because if you haven't, I need to explain it. Oh, that's not bad. And how many of you heard of the 6 C's? Aha, excellent. That's what comes of having something that really means something for over 4 years. But anyway, so leading change, adding value, for those of you that don't know, is a new framework for nursing midwifery care staff that I launched in May of this year. And it's set on the principle of improving care in 3 key areas. One is around improving health and wellbeing. The second is about improving care and quality. And the third is about making sure we do that and make the best use of the funding and being as efficient as we can. And we add value to that by living and breathing and embodying the 6 C's, but also about reducing unwarranted variation. And some people say, well, what do you mean by unwarranted variation? You know, that sounds, when you hear that word, or those 2 words actually, one of the things people do is sort of like switch off, because it doesn't mean very much. But when you start to look at what we do and how we do it, actually there is a lot of variation across the system. It can be a variation between a care home and another care home, between a community service and another community service, between one ward and another ward. And the key about unwarranted variation is understanding why there is that variation, and is it based on anything real? Is it based on population? Is it based on evidence? What is it that you're doing that's different? And if we do reduce unwarranted variation, there's enough knowledge now and enough evidence that says we can both improve outcomes and do that in the right way. So one of the reasons I really wanted to link Jons' campaign to the new framework was so that people can go and think about how you can use leading change, adding value to reduce unwarranted variation and really drive to make a difference to people with dementia and their carers in whichever field of practice or whichever area that you work in. So the 3 gaps. The first gap is health and wellbeing, and the point about that is really about maintaining population health, about keeping people as independent as possible for as long as possible. It's about promoting healthy behaviours, and actually nurses and midwives and care staff, care support staff, really taking the lead in driving that. It is everybody's business. And we know that actually if we do the very best we can to keep people at home, they will be less disorientated, they will have less of an impact. And we also know that quite often people that go into hospital come out with more significant people with dementia that go into hospital come out with more significant physical ill health and also mental ill health. So there is something very practical about if we can really support patients and people with dementia and their loved ones and their carers to be as well as possible and to stay as well as possible and reduce the need for being in hospital, then actually that's really good. And for me, there's something about Jons' campaign not only having a massive priority around inpatients, but also thinking about how we can use those principles out in a community setting. So for me, health and wellbeing is a really critical way. And actually there is, the Triangle of Care was published by the Carers Trust, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And that's about taking the opportunity to support carers as much as we support people with dementia, because if we do that, we know we get better outcomes. In terms of the care and quality gap, if we apply those best standards of care sustainably and without too much variation, we can really truly make a difference in the triple aim outcomes around improving health, improving experience, and doing that in the best possible way. And many places are doing that already. And I think for me, it's about learning from the best. And I was at an event in Gibraltar yesterday. That's not me gadding all over the world, but because I'm a professor at Kingston and St George University, and Kingston University provide the support to Gibraltar for their graduate nursing programme, I went over to do a talk at their conference. And one of the things I said to them, and one of the things I'll say to you, is we don't often talk enough about the things we do well. So linking back to what Jeremy was saying about the Daily Mail and some of the negative press that you see both in some of the nursing media, to be honest, but also some of the tabloid media, is we don't talk about what we do well. And when I speak to nurses about why that is, what I often get told is, well, I only just, or we're only just doing our job. Well, we're only just doing what we think's right. And actually there's something for me about saying, be proud of what you do. And actually if you are doing something that is having a good impact and actually resulting in improvements, then actually say something. So Trafford Hospital was one of the first, which is part of Central Manchester Foundation Trust. Trafford was one of the first places to implement Jons' campaign, and they've just done an evaluation report. And they've had an over, I think it's about 52% reduction in falls. And they put that down to having carers with people with dementia supporting them. And they've also seen, and this is an interesting figure, 100% reduction in complaints. So I think for me there's something about being prepared to do that evaluation and talk about it. And let people like me know, so that when I stand on a platform and I talk to people, I can also talk about it. And then some of you might want to give them a ring and find out what they do. So that's really important. So be really, and actually making sure that when we talk about the caring for carers, we really do mean that. And there's a lot of evidence that talks about if carers feel supported and they have their physical and mental health supported, both in primary care and also when loved ones go into hospital, it can make a really big difference. And then the third area is the funding and efficiency gap. And the reason I've pointed that out is because we will all know that the NHS and social care system is in quite significant financial stress, and everybody is struggling to be able to fund things and to do the right things. So for me, there's something very strong about us as a profession really stepping up and saying, so what can we do? And what can we do to support making sure we use the funding we've got to the best of our ability, and that you seriously think about what you're doing as individuals. And whenever I speak to nurses, which I do all the time, you're the ones that tell me, and I know that's not just nurses in the ring, but it will be those of you that are in any way involved in care will know that you can identify where there's waste. You can identify where you're doing things that you don't need to do. And you can also identify where you think there's money being wasted. So actually talk about it and come up with ideas about how we can improve it. And if we can reduce that variation again, we make the best use of the funding we've got, and we can do more with it. And at the end of the day, that's really what matters. So the carer's passport is a really good way of doing that. Making sure that there's a conversation with carers when they arrive in hospital, that they're given information and advice, that they're able to spend time, that Jons' campaign really does mean something. So when Jeremy said it's not just about a poster on the wall, it's about what happens. I had really good personal experience of this when my dad was admitted to hospital in January of this year. And my dad had Lewy bodies dementia. And he went into the ward, and I got called. I went in with him, and I got called back at midnight after he'd had another MI, and this time was actually critically ill. So I got called back to Bristol really late, and I went back into the ward, and this time I noticed a Jons' campaign poster up on the entrance to the ward, and I remember taking a photograph of it and then subsequently tweeted it. But the really important thing for me was that somebody did come round, and they talked to me and my mum and my brother about carers. They talked about my mum, how much support my mum had. They talked to us about what my dad was like and how well he was able to cope and what particular issues we had. And they were consistently there. And they did this not because they thought I was the CNO for England and therefore they ought to do this. And there's always a risk of that, actually, because I don't think many people knew. The ward sister knew, and actually some student nurses recognised me, which is a bit daunting. But actually, I didn't make a big thing of it. I didn't hide it, but I didn't make a big thing of it. But the important thing was I was there a lot and I saw them behave like that with other people. So it's about turning the poster into reality. And I know that in North Bristol Trust, down in Southwood Hospital, that's what they did, and I thank them for that because they looked after my dad brilliantly up until his death, and they were fantastic to me and my mum and my brother and my dad. So that was really, really important and really meaningful for me. I'm just going to rush on because I haven't got slides. I end up talking for longer. So Julia or Nikki, please shout at me when I get close to my time. So I just wanted to give you a couple more examples, really. One of the practical things we've done in NHS England is that we've supported a Jons campaign through a sequin. So that basically means that clinical commissioning groups have the opportunity to provide funding for hospitals that actually do implement Jons campaign. And I think that's really meaningful. And I think that's a way of really helping to drive this proactive implementation. And it's not about doing it for the money. It's about doing it because it's the right thing to do. But clearly having a bit of money helps. And so I would say to you, if you're in an organisation that doesn't do it, then go out and start banging on doors and say, why aren't we doing it? Why haven't your RCCG commissioned this as a sequin? What is it that we can do to demonstrate that we are actually delivering Jons campaign and giving carers and people with dementia the right support? There's a variety of great work that's going on. Hampshire hospitals have got a brilliant set of dementia friends that go in and spend time with people with dementia on their wards. They do everything from talking to them, reminiscing, playing music, painting nails, all sorts of things that really support the people with dementia and their carers. John Radcliffe has got a dedicated dementia lead that actually spends time with carers as they go into the hospital. I've already talked about Trafford, and I've also talked about North Bristol. And we've got others like St Mary's in Paddington, one of Imperial's, and others where we've got specific dementia wards really designed to care for people in the right way and support people. I won't go into this in detail because it means more when you've got the slides up, but I wanted just to say that with Leading Change Adding Value, we've got 10 commitments. And those commitments are things that we think are really important, and you told us were really important. And the first 3 of those are around health and wellbeing and working with families. And there's one that says we will work in partnership with individuals, their families, carers, and others important to them. And if that doesn't epitomise to me why Jons campaign is so important, none of the others do. So go along with people like Imperial who've got the carers passport, and the fact that they've subsequently looked at that and updated it and are doing more work on that. Absolutely brilliant. We've also got commitments that are around leading and driving research and evidence, also really important, and making sure that we actively respond to what matters to our staff. So I'm going to end I would have ended with a picture of the 6 Cs. But one of the things that happened when we did the 6 Cs was that there was a couple of extra Cs that people put in. And one of those was chocolate and the other one was champagne. So I felt it was just the right thing when Jeremy mentioned champagne earlier. And so for me, the 7th C today is champagne to celebrate the great work that Nikki and Julia have led on Jons campaign, and for us as a collective group to really go out there and drive it. So think about what you can do through Leading Change, Adding Value to make a difference, and let us know what you're doing, and sing from the rooftops about the good thing, and listen and learn from others and make those steps to implement change and really, really drive the care for people with dementia and the carers that look after them so well. Thank you very much for listening.